They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were dead wrong. My name is Ray Coleman, and 3 weeks ago, some hotshot CEO half my age stood up in front of 650 people and basically called me worthless. What she didn't know, I was the only guy keeping their $2, $8 billion company from crashing into the ground. But let me back up and tell you how this whole thing started, because trust me, you're going to love what happened next. I'd been working at Apex Financial Technologies for 32 years. Yeah, 32. I started when computers were the size of refrigerators, and most people thought email was a fad. By the time this story begins, I was 58, getting ready to coast into retirement, maybe work on my Harley collection. I was what they called a senior systems architect, which is fancy talk for the guy who knows where all the bodies are buried. Every company has one. That old-timer who's been there forever knows every system inside and out and gets called at 2 a.m. when everything goes to hell. That was me, the IBM mainframe we used to process payments. I designed half the connections that made it talk to modern systems. The authentication protocols that kept hackers out, my code. The emergency procedures that prevented us from losing millions during system failures, all me, baby. Here's what killed me. And you'll appreciate this if you've ever worked anywhere for more than 5 minutes. I actually liked my job. I took pride in keeping things running smooth. When other companies were getting hacked left and right, we were rock solid. When competitors were losing client data, we never lost a penny. But apparently being good at your job for 3 decades makes you a single point of failure. That's corporate speak for old guy who needs to go. So picture this. It's a Tuesday morning in February, and everybody's gathered in the main conference room for an all-hands meeting. You know the drill. Management wants to announce something exciting that usually means layoffs or budget cuts. But this time was different. This time they were introducing our new CEO. Enter Melissa Preston. 33 years old, Stanford MBA, came from some tech startup in Austin that got bought out for stupid money. She walked into that room like she owned the place, which I guess technically she did. I'm sitting in the back, minding my own business when she starts her presentation. Right off the bat, I know we're in trouble. She's throwing around buzzwords like they're going out of style. Digital transformation, disruptive innovation, legacy elimination. You hear that? That's code for fire all the old guys. But here's the kicker, and this is where I should have seen the writing on the wall. She puts up this slide about single points of failure. And I swear to God, she looked right at me when she said it. We need to eliminate organizational dependencies, she says, clicking to the next slide. No one person should be irreplaceable. I'm thinking, lady, you have no idea what you're talking about. But I kept my mouth shut. 32 years of corporate life teaches you to pick your battles. After the meeting, my buddy Danny, he runs security operations, been there almost as long as me, comes up shaking his head. Ray, did you hear that shit? Legacy elimination? They're talking about getting rid of us old-timers. Danny, relax, she's new. Once she sees how things actually work around here, she'll calm down. Man, was I wrong about that? Dead wrong, because 3 days later, she brought in the consultants. Oh, you're going to love this part. So Melissa brings in this consulting firm from Austin, 3 kids who probably weren't even born when I started coding. Austin Consulting Group, they called themselves. Probably charged us 50 grand just to walk in the door. The lead guy was Brad Hoffman, 28 years old, kept talking about cloud architecture like he'd invented the damn internet. Then there was Kevin Brooks, some DevOps hotshot who learned everything from YouTube tutorials. And Rachel Green, the API specialist who'd never seen a mainframe in her life. First meeting, Brad walks up to me with this cocky smile and says, Ray, we're here to document all your processes so we can eliminate single points of failure. Eliminate single points of failure. There's that phrase again. Sure thing, Brad, I said. What do you want to know? So I spent the next 2 weeks showing them our systems. I walked them through the authentication protocols, showed them the daily maintenance routines, explained how our IBM mainframe talks to the modern payment networks. These kids took notes like their lives depended on it. But here's what I didn't tell them, and this is important, so pay attention. There's stuff you learn over 30 years that doesn't go in any manual. Like how every 72 hours, our authentication system needs a manual reset with a 16-digit code that I calculate in my head. Or how when the system starts acting weird on Fridays, you need to call Jerry Walsh at IBM directly, not go through their normal support channels. You know why I didn't tell them? Because they didn't ask the right questions. They were so busy being impressed with themselves, they assumed everything important was written down somewhere. Kevin actually had the balls to tell me, this legacy stuff seems unnecessarily complicated. We could rebuild this whole thing in the cloud in like 3 months. I just smiled and nodded. You're probably right, Kevin. Inside, I'm thinking, kid, you have no idea what you're dealing with. 3 weeks later, I get the email. You know the one, please see me in my office at 9 a.m. Monday morning. No explanation, just that cold corporate tone that means somebody's about to get screwed. I spent the weekend working on my '73 Harley, trying not to think about it. My wife Sarah used to say I talk to my motorcycles more than I talk to people. She passed away 3 years ago, cancer, and I still find myself having conversations with her picture on my workbench. What do you think, honey? I asked her photo. Think they're really stupid enough to fire the guy who keeps this place running? Monday morning comes and I walk into Melissa's office. She's got this fancy standing desk with about 6 monitors, all showing these productivity charts and graphs. Real Silicon Valley bullshit. Ray, thank you for coming, she says, not even looking up from her computer. I'll get right to the point. We're restructuring, and we've decided to offer you an early retirement package. Just like that. 32 years, and she's talking to me like I'm some intern she's letting go. I kept my cool, though. Can I ask why, honestly? You represent everything we're trying to move away from. The consulting team has documented your processes, and we're confident we can automate most of what you do. This isn't personal, Ray. It's just business. Not personal, right. Tell that to the guy whose entire career just got flushed down the toilet. She slides this envelope across her desk. Full pension, healthcare coverage, and a $25,000 transition bonus. It's a generous offer. I opened it up, saw all the legal paperwork, and something inside me just clicked. You know what I mean? That moment when you realize you've been loyal to people who see you as nothing more than a line item on a spreadsheet. When's my last day? I asked. Friday would be ideal. That gives us time for a proper transition. I stood up, tucked the envelope under my arm, and looked her right in the eye. Melissa, you have no idea what you just did. My last week was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Everybody knew what was happening, but nobody wanted to talk about it. People kept coming by my desk with these awkward looks, like they were attending my funeral. Lisa Park. She's this sharp kid I'd been mentoring for 3 years. She was almost crying during our final handover session. Ray, this is bullshit, she whispered. You know more about these systems than everyone else combined. What happens when something breaks? I looked at this kid who reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Eager and smart, but still green. And I made a decision that would change everything. Lisa, listen to me carefully. There are things about these systems that aren't in any manual. When something goes wrong, and trust me, it will, don't let them pressure you into guessing. Make them call for help. She nodded, but I could see she didn't really understand what I was telling her. Meanwhile, Brad and his consulting team were practically high-fiving each other. They thought they'd cracked the code, documented everything they needed. Brad actually came up to me with his laptop, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Ray, I think we've got everything covered. Your transition documentation is really comprehensive. I'm sure you do, Brad, I said, packing up my coffee mug, the one with the Harley logo that Sarah had given me for my 50th birthday. What I didn't tell him was that I'd given them exactly what they asked for: standard procedures, basic passwords, regular maintenance schedules. But the real secrets? The stuff that keeps a $2. 8 billion company running when everything goes sideways? That was still locked up in my head. You see, I knew something they didn't. In exactly 4 days, our authentication system would need its 72-hour manual reset. And the 16-digit code that unlocks it? Well, that wasn't written down anywhere. Friday afternoon, I cleaned out my desk, shook hands with Danny, and walked out of Apex Financial Technologies for what I thought was the last time. But here's the thing about revenge. Sometimes the best kind is just stepping back and letting stupid people prove how stupid they are. You know what's funny about forced retirement? The first few days you actually feel relieved. No more 6 a.m. alarm. No more corporate bullshit. No more pretending to care about quarterly reports. I spent Monday morning sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the paper like a normal human being. My son Michael called from Seattle around lunchtime. Dad, how you holding up? I'm still pissed about what they did to you. I'm fine, son. Maybe it's time for a change anyway. But I wasn't fine. 32 years of getting up, going to work, solving problems. That doesn't just disappear overnight. I felt like a part of me had been ripped out. Tuesday, I tried to stay busy. Worked on the Harley, organized my garage, called my daughter Jennifer. She's a teacher, got that same stubborn streak I do. Dad, you sound different. Sad, maybe. This isn't like you. She was right. I was angry, but more than that, I felt discarded, like an old piece of equipment they'd finally decided to throw away. But then Tuesday afternoon, Danny texted me, Ray, Heads up, the authentication system needs its reset tomorrow. Should I tell the consultants? I stared at that text for about 10 minutes. Here's the thing. I could have called Brad, walked him through it, been the nice guy one more time. 32 years of loyalty, right? Instead, I typed back, "Not my problem anymore, Danny. They've got documentation and smart people. I'm sure they'll figure it out." And I meant it. They wanted to eliminate the single point of failure? Great, let's see how that works out for them. Wednesday morning came and went. I was in my garage, polishing chrome that was already spotless, when I heard my phone start buzzing. Then buzzing some more. I looked at the screen. 5 missed calls from different people at Apex. That's when I smiled for the first time since getting fired. The show was about to begin. Wednesday, 9:23 a.m. I know the exact time because that's when our authentication system locked itself down tighter than Fort Knox. I wasn't there to see it, obviously, but Danny called me an hour later and I could hear the panic in his voice. "Ray, what the hell is going on?" "The mainframe won't talk to any of our modern systems." Brad's running around like his hair's on fire. "Authentication reset," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "Happens every 72 hours. Didn't they document that during the handover?" "Ray, you know damn well that calculation is all in your head. These kids don't have a clue." And that's when it hit me. The perfect, beautiful irony of the whole situation. They fired me to eliminate their single point of failure. But in doing so, they'd created the biggest failure of all. See, here's what was happening while I was enjoying my retirement. Every payment that came through our system, credit cards, wire transfers, ACH processing, all of it depends on that mainframe talking to our modern API systems. And when the authentication fails, nothing goes through. Nothing. We process about $1. 2 billion in transactions every day. That's not a typo, billion with a B. So when the system locks up for even a few hours, the numbers get scary fast. By noon, Brad was calling me directly. I let it go to voicemail. "Ray, this is Brad from Austin Consulting. We're having some issues with the authentication system you mentioned. Could you call us back? It's kind of urgent." "Kind of urgent." That's Rich. Kevin called next. Then Rachel. Then even Melissa herself left a voicemail, trying to sound all professional. "Ray, if you could give us a quick call to clarify some technical details, we'd really appreciate it." But you know what? I was busy, had some chrome to polish, some fish to catch, important retirement stuff. By 5 p.m. Wednesday, they had $4, 2 million in transactions sitting in limbo, and their first regulatory inquiry in 15 years. The best part? I hadn't done a damn thing except not answer my phone. Thursday morning, my phone was blowing up before I even had my first cup of coffee. 23 missed calls, and that was just overnight. But here's the thing, I wasn't being vindictive. I was just retired. You know how it is when you retire? You sleep in, take your time with breakfast, maybe watch some news. Very relaxing. Danny called around 8 a.m., and he sounded like he hadn't slept. "Ray, this is getting bad. Really bad. They've got IBM on the phone trying to walk them through your authentication system, but these kids don't even know what questions to ask." "That's rough, Danny." "Jerry Walsh from IBM specifically asked to talk to you. Said your team doesn't understand the integration protocols you built." Now that made me chuckle. Jerry and I go way back. Probably saved each other's asses a dozen times over the years. Good guy knows his stuff. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you don't work here anymore." "Ray," he actually said, "they fired Ray Coleman? Are they out of their minds?" Even IBM thought they were idiots. That felt good. But the real kicker came Thursday afternoon. Patricia Williams from compliance called me personally. Patricia's been there 15 years, handles all our regulatory stuff, and she never calls anybody unless the building's on fire. "Ray, I need you to know that the Federal Reserve is asking questions about our delayed settlement files. This is the first time in 15 years we've missed a deadline. 15 years of perfect compliance down the drain in 2 days. I'm sorry to hear that, Patricia. Have you talked to the consulting team?" "Ray, they don't even know what settlement files are." That's when it really hit me. These weren't just system failures, this was reputational damage that takes years to build and minutes to destroy. Apex had spent decades building trust with regulators, clients, and banking partners, and Melissa's brain trust was pissing it all away because they were too proud to admit they were in over their heads. By Thursday night, they had $12. 8 million in stuck transactions and client complaints flooding in. My phone finally stopped ringing around 11 p.m. I slept like a baby. Friday brought the kind of news that makes CEOs wake up in cold sweats. Harrison Manufacturing, our biggest client, 12% of our annual revenue, sent a formal notice that they were evaluating alternative payment processing solutions due to recent service disruptions. In corporate speak, that means fix your shit or we're gone. Danny filled me in during his lunch break. Poor guy was working double shifts trying to coordinate with vendors who had no idea what was happening. Ray, it's a complete clusterfuck in there. The board called an emergency meeting for Monday. Word is Melissa's on thin ice. What about the consulting team? Brad's been locked in the conference room since Thursday morning, trying to reverse engineer your authentication system. Kevin keeps muttering about how legacy code is impossible to debug. And Rachel? She actually asked Lisa if she had your personal phone number. That got a chuckle out of me. These kids had spent 3 weeks telling everyone how easy it would be to replace me, and now they wanted me to bail them out. But the real gut punch came Sunday evening. My daughter Jennifer called with news that made my blood boil. Dad, I saw something on the financial news about Apex. They're saying there might be regulatory violations? What the hell is going on over there? When your company makes the news for compliance failures, that's not good news. That's career-ending, company-killing bad news. Jennifer, remember how I told you they fired me to eliminate their single point of failure? Yeah, you said it was corporate bullshit. Well, turns out their single point of failure wasn't me having too much knowledge. It was them having too little. I spent Sunday evening on my back porch, beer in hand, watching the sunset and thinking about 32 years of late nights, weekend emergencies, and missed family dinners to keep that company running smooth. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ray, this is Melissa. I know I have no right to ask, but could we talk? Please. I deleted the message without responding. But deep down, I knew this couldn't go on much longer. Apex was hemorrhaging money, clients were threatening to leave, and regulatory agencies were circling like vultures. The question was, how much pain would it take before their pride finally broke? Monday morning's emergency board meeting was something I wish I could have watched. Danny gave me the play-by-play later, and man, I wish I had popcorn for this story. Picture this. Melissa walks into the conference room trying to look confident, but she's got that deer-in-headlights look of someone who knows they're about to get reamed. The board members are sitting around that big mahogany table, and you can cut the tension with a knife. William Garrett, he's the chairman, hired me back in '92, good guy. He starts off diplomatic. Melissa, please brief us on the operational situation. So she launches into this corporate bullshit about temporary processing delays and how the consulting team is working around the clock. Classic CEO deflection. But then Dr. Torres, this guy used to work for the FDIC, knows banking inside and out. He slides a folder across the table and says, temporary? These are formal violation notices from the Federal Reserve. Our settlement reporting is 5 days overdue. 5 days. In banking, that's like being 5 hours late for your own wedding. It just doesn't happen. Amanda Richardson, the investor who put $50 million into this company, she leans forward like a shark smelling blood. Melissa, what's the timeline for resolution? And here's where it gets good. Melissa starts stuttering about how Brad's team has identified the core issue and they need 48 to 72 hours. The room goes dead quiet. You know that silence when everybody knows somebody's lying but they're waiting to see how deep the hole gets? Finally, Richardson drops the hammer. Melissa, Harrison Manufacturing just sent notice they're reviewing alternatives. That's 12% of our revenue. Pride isn't worth bankruptcy. Then Garrett, bless his heart, he throws out the lifeline. There's one other option. Ray Coleman designed these systems. He might be willing to consult. And get this, Melissa actually says absolutely not. That would undermine everything we've accomplished. Accomplished. The woman had just supervised the biggest operational failure in company history, and she's talking about accomplishments. That's when Richardson played her ace. Fix this by Wednesday, or we discuss leadership alternatives. Corporate speak for, fix this or you're fired. 11:47 p.m. Monday night. I was in my garage working on the Harley when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, Melissa Preston. Now, I could have let it go to voicemail. Should have, probably. But curiosity got the better of me. Ray, this is Melissa. I know it's late, and I'm sorry to bother you. Her voice was different. None of that Silicon Valley confidence. She sounded broken. Hello, Melissa. I heard about the processing delays. Sorry to see the company struggling. Ray, I need to ask you something, and I know I don't have the right. Would you consider coming in tomorrow, just as an emergency consultant? We'd pay premium rates. Here's the thing. I could hear her swallowing her pride through the phone. This woman who'd called me a single point of failure 3 weeks ago was now begging me to save her ass. I let the silence stretch out. Not to be cruel, but because I wanted her to really feel what she'd done. Sometimes people need to sit in their mistakes for a while before they can learn from them. I'll think about it, I finally said. Good night, Melissa. After I hung up, I sat there looking at Sarah's picture on my workbench. She always had better instincts about people than I did. What do you think, honey? Do I help them out or let them figure it out on their own? But I already knew what she'd say. Sarah never held grudges. She'd tell me that good people sometimes make bad decisions, and the measure of a person isn't whether they mess up, it's whether they can admit they were wrong. The truth was, I missed the work, not the corporate bullshit, not the politics, but the actual problem solving, the satisfaction of fixing something that's broken. And despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to see Apex go under. Too many good people worked there, people like Danny and Lisa who didn't deserve to pay for Melissa's mistakes. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. She wanted me back. She was going to have to ask properly. And more importantly, she was going to have to admit that maybe, just maybe, the old guy knew what he was talking about. Tuesday morning, I put on a clean shirt and drove to the office for the first time in a week. Time to see how badly they really needed me. Walking into that office Tuesday morning felt surreal. I'd been gone 1 week, but it looked like a war zone. People were running around with that panicked look you see during system failures, except this panic had been going on for 6 days straight. Danny spotted me first in the parking lot. Ray, Jesus Christ, am I glad to see you? This place is falling apart. Morning, Danny. Thought I'd stop by, see how the modernization was going. He didn't laugh. Ray, I'm not kidding. Melissa's been in crisis mode since Monday. The consulting team looks like they haven't slept since you left. I walked through the office, and it was like a scene from one of those disaster movies. Kevin was hunched over his laptop, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and crumpled papers. Brad was on the phone, and I could hear him getting screamed at by someone, probably Jerry Walsh from IBM. Rachel actually looked up when she saw me and whispered, "Oh, thank God." But the real moment came when I knocked on Melissa's office door. She looked up from her computer, and I swear her face just crumpled with relief. Ray, thank you for coming. Please sit down. Now, I've been in corporate long enough to read body language. This wasn't the confident CEO who'd fired me a week ago. This was a woman who'd spent 6 days learning the difference between confidence and competence. Ray, I need your help with the authentication lockout. The consulting team has tried everything they can think of. What exactly do you need from me, Melissa? I need you to fix this. All of it, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. That's when I knew I had her. She wasn't asking me to consult or advise or provide input. She was asking me to take over and save her company. Melissa, before we talk about anything else, I need to be clear about something. I'm not here to prove a point or settle scores. If I help you, it's because this company matters to me, not because of what happened last week. I understand, she said quietly. What do you need? 30 minutes alone with the system to assess the damage. Then we'll talk about terms. She nodded so fast I thought her head might fall off. So there I was, sitting at my old workstation for the first time in a week, with Brad, Kevin, and Rachel hovering around me like med students watching brain surgery. My fingers felt right back at home on that keyboard. Muscle memory is a hell of a thing. All right, kids, let me show you what really happened here, I said, pulling up diagnostic screens they'd probably never seen before. Within 10 minutes, I had the whole picture. It was actually worse than I'd thought. See this cascade here? I pointed to a series of error logs. When the authentication system locked down last Wednesday, it didn't just stop new transactions. It corrupted the backup validation protocols I built in 2016. Kevin was frantically taking notes. Why didn't we see that in the monitoring dashboards? Because the monitoring system only tracks what it's programmed to look for. This particular failure mode happens maybe once every 5 years. And when it does, it's usually during a crisis when nobody's thinking straight. Brad leaned over my shoulder. Ray, how long would it take to fix all this? I turned around in my chair and looked at these 3 kids who'd spent a week learning the hardest lesson in IT. There's a difference between knowing how to code and knowing how to fix 30 years of accumulated technical debt. Brad, the authentication reset? That's 20 minutes once I calculate the sequence. But the real problem is everything that broke while you were trying to fix it. See, every time you rebooted the system or tried a different approach, you created new inconsistencies. Rachel looked like she was going to cry. How bad is it? Well, let's see. You've got transaction data scattered across 3 backup systems, settlement files that don't match the Federal Reserve's records, and about 47 different error states that are all feeding back on each other. The room went quiet. But here's the good news, I continued. It's not unfixable. I built most of these systems, so I know where all the hidden switches are. Give me full access and about 18 hours of uninterrupted time, and I can get you back to normal operations. 18 hours? Brad asked. Yep. But first, we need to talk about how this never happens again. That's when Melissa walked over. She'd been watching from across the room, and I could see the relief on her face. Ray, what are your terms? Time to negotiate. You know what's beautiful about leverage? When you have it, you don't need to be a dick about it. The situation speaks for itself. Here's what I'm thinking, I said, leaning back in my chair while Melissa, Brad, and half the management team waited to hear if their company was going to survive. 3 phases. I held up one finger. Phase 1, emergency crisis resolution. $1,000 an hour, 72-hour maximum. I fix the immediate problems, get your system stable, and make sure the Federal Reserve doesn't shut you down. Melissa nodded so fast I thought she might hurt herself. Phase 2, 90-day stabilization period. You bring me back as interim CTO at $220,000 annualized. I rebuild your operations team properly, implement real knowledge transfer protocols, and make sure this shit never happens again. And phase 3? She asked. If we're all happy with how things go, we discuss a permanent CTO position at $240,000 plus equity. But here's the thing, Melissa. I don't just want authority over systems. I want authority over hiring, firing, and training. No more consultants unless I approve them first. Amanda Richardson, the investor who'd been ready to fire Melissa 2 days ago, was listening from the corner. Ray, these terms are significantly higher than your previous compensation. Ma'am, you're not paying for what I used to do. You're paying for 32 years of knowledge that almost destroyed your company when it walked out the door. Plus, I guarantee Jerry Walsh at IBM will actually answer my calls. That got a chuckle from a few people who'd been dealing with IBM's standard support runaround for a week. Ray, Melissa said quietly, I owe you an apology. I completely underestimated what you brought to this company. Melissa, you're not the first CEO who thought documentation could replace experience. Question is, are we going to work together going forward, or are you going to keep fighting 30 years of institutional knowledge? William Garrett, bless him, spoke up from the back. Ray, your terms are more than fair. When can you start? I looked at my watch. 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Give me access to that mainframe terminal, and I'll have your systems running by close of business today. But I want Brad, Kevin, and Rachel shadowing my every move. If we're doing this right, they need to understand not just what I'm doing, but why I'm doing it. Because here's the thing, I wasn't interested in being the indispensable guy forever. I wanted to build something sustainable. Time to get to work. What happened next was like watching a master craftsman work. I'm not trying to brag here, but 32 years of experience has its privileges. I sat down at that mainframe terminal, cracked my knuckles, and started typing commands that made Brad's eyes go wide. First thing, I said, pulling up screens the consulting team had never seen, we need to access the authentication management console. This isn't in your documentation because it's a diagnostic tool I built during a leap year crisis in 2016. Kevin was frantically scribbling notes. How do you even remember these access codes? Kevin, when you've been doing this as long as I have, it becomes second nature. Watch this. I opened a terminal window and started typing what looked like hieroglyphics to these kids. A complex mathematical formula that incorporated system timestamps, daily transaction volumes, and a hash validation sequence I'd memorized years ago. The authentication token isn't just random numbers, I explained while my fingers flew across the keyboard. It's calculated based on system state, time factors, and regulatory compliance requirements that have been modified dozens of times over 15 years. Rachel was watching over my shoulder, trying to follow the logic. Ray, this is incredibly complex. How did you even develop this algorithm? Trial and error, mostly. Plus about 6 different emergency situations where the standard protocols weren't good enough. Within 12 minutes, I had calculated the correct authentication sequence and entered it into the mainframe. Immediately, every monitoring screen in the room started showing green lights. Transaction processing resumed. Settlement files began generating. It was like watching a patient come back to life. Holy shit, Brad whispered, watching his dashboard as 6 days of backed-up transactions started flowing through the system. Language, Brad, I said with a grin. But yeah, that's basically the idea. Lisa Park, who'd been watching from across the room, came over with tears in her eyes. Ray, I tried to tell them about the authentication reset, but they said the documentation covered everything. Lisa, you were absolutely right to speak up. Don't ever let anyone tell you to ignore your instincts, especially when you know something's wrong. The best part? Within 20 minutes, we had $12. 8 million in stuck transactions flowing normally again, and Apex Financial Technologies was back in business. But I wasn't done teaching yet. For the next 4 hours, I gave Brad, Kevin, and Rachel the education they should have gotten in the first place. Not just here's how to run these commands, but here's why these systems work the way they do. See, this is what you missed during your handover sessions, I said, pulling up vendor contact screens. You documented the standard procedures, but you didn't understand the relationships. Kevin looked confused. What do you mean relationships? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Jerry Walsh's contact. Jerry and I have worked together for 20 years. When there's an emergency, I don't go through IBM's standard support queue. I call Jerry directly. He knows my voice, trusts my technical judgment, and prioritizes our issues because I've never called him with stupid questions. Rachel was taking notes like her life depended on it. How do we build those kinds of relationships? Time and competence, Rachel. You prove yourself reliable, you do your homework before calling for help, and you treat vendors like partners instead of service providers. Jerry helps me because I've helped him look good to his management dozens of times over the years. But the real teaching moment came when Lisa asked the smartest question anyone had asked all week. Ray, why didn't you document the authentication algorithm? Wasn't that risky? I leaned back in my chair. Lisa, that's exactly the right question. The truth is, I started documenting it about 5 times over the years. But every time I wrote it down, I realized that without the context, understanding why I built it that way, what problems it solves, what edge cases it handles, the documentation was actually dangerous. Dangerous how? Brad asked. Because someone might try to improve it without understanding what they were breaking. This algorithm accounts for leap years, banking holidays, time zone changes, and about 12 different regulatory requirements that have evolved over 15 years. You change one variable without understanding the others, and boom, system failure. The room got quiet. I could see the light bulb moments happening. So how do we prevent this from happening again? Melissa asked. She'd been listening from across the room, and I could tell she was finally getting it. Easy. You build a team that combines experience with innovation. You don't replace institutional knowledge. You transfer it gradually while building new capabilities. And most importantly, you never fire the guy who built your critical systems until you're absolutely sure someone else can maintain them. That last part wasn't meant to be a dig, but Melissa winced anyway. Good. Some lessons need to hurt a little. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new corner office. Yeah, they gave me the one with the view of Mount Hood, reviewing quarterly performance reports that would have made my old self weep with joy. System uptime, 99. 7%. Client retention, 94%. Regulatory violations, 0 for 12 straight weeks. Revenue growth, 28%, and we did it the right way, through improved efficiency instead of cutting costs. The morning staff meeting at 9 a.m. had become something I actually looked forward to. Gone were the days of consultants with PowerPoint presentations full of buzzwords. Now we had a hybrid team that actually knew what they were doing. Lisa Park, remember her? The kid who tried to warn everyone about the authentication reset? She was now my senior systems analyst, and let me tell you, this girl was sharp as a tack. She stood up to present her latest project with confidence that reminded me of myself 30 years ago. The payment processing optimization is ahead of schedule, she reported. We've reduced average transaction time by 12% while maintaining full regulatory compliance. Kevin Brooks, who'd learned to ask better questions over the past 3 months, raised his hand. Lisa, walk us through the testing methodology. I want to make sure we're not missing any edge cases. Edge cases. 3 months ago, this kid didn't even know what an edge case was. Kevin, that's exactly the right question, Lisa said, and I felt this surge of pride watching my protege teach someone else. But the real change was Melissa. She walked into the conference room at 9:15, punctual as always now, but different. Gone was the Silicon Valley swagger, replaced by something better. Humility mixed with genuine leadership. Ray, yesterday's board meeting went really well. William Garrett specifically mentioned our balanced approach to innovation. We're exceeding growth targets while maintaining operational excellence. Good to hear. How's the knowledge documentation project coming along? Rachel's been working with our senior team members to create proper institutional knowledge repositories. Not just how to do things, but why we do things this way. That was the key insight that had taken Melissa 3 months to really understand. It's not enough to document procedures, you have to document the reasoning behind them. My phone rang. Jerry Walsh from IBM with an update on our hardware upgrade timeline. After I hung up, I noticed something that would have seemed impossible 4 months ago. Nobody looked stressed when my phone rang. Nobody panicked about vendor calls or system updates. We'd built something sustainable. 6 months after the whole mess started, I was having one of those conversations with my son Michael that made me realize how much had changed, not just at work, but in me. Dad, you sound completely different when you talk about work now. Like actually happy instead of just going through the motions. He was right. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I was excited to go to work on Monday mornings. I am happy, son. I feel like I'm building something that's going to last, instead of just maintaining systems and hoping nothing breaks. So you're not thinking about retiring anymore? Actually, I'm thinking 5 years instead of 3. But here's the difference. I'm building a proper succession plan. Lisa's developing into a hell of a systems architect, and Kevin's starting to understand that patience is just as important as technical skills. My daughter Jennifer noticed it too when she called later that week. Dad, when you talk about that Melissa woman now, you don't sound angry anymore. What changed? That was a good question. What had changed? I guess I learned the difference between someone who's incompetent and someone who's just inexperienced. Melissa made mistakes, big ones, but she learned from them. She's actually a pretty good CEO now that she understands what she doesn't know. The weekend brought my usual ritual, working on the bikes in my garage with Sarah's picture keeping me company. But instead of feeling lonely or bitter, I felt peaceful, like I'd finally figured out what I was supposed to be doing with the rest of my career. Danny stopped by Saturday afternoon with beer and updates. Ray, you know what's funny? The whole culture at Apex has changed since you came back. People actually seem to respect experience now instead of treating it like a liability. Well, it helps when experience comes with humility instead of stubbornness. Is that a dig at yourself? I laughed. Maybe a little. I was pretty set in my ways before all this happened. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it sucked at the time. How so? Because it forced me to prove that my knowledge was valuable, instead of just assuming people should respect it. And it showed me the difference between being indispensable and being irreplaceable. Indispensable means you're trapped. Irreplaceable means you get to choose your own terms. That night, I got a call from a headhunter offering me a CTO position at a competitor for $320,000. 3 months ago, I might have been tempted. Instead, I politely declined. I already had everything I needed. 1 year later, I'm standing at a podium in front of 400 financial technology professionals at the Northwest FinTech Conference, and I still can't believe they asked me to be the keynote speaker. The topic? Building bridges between legacy systems and modern innovation. Yeah, I know. Who would have thought the old dinosaur would be giving advice to the industry? The biggest mistake organizations make, I told the audience, is treating legacy systems like obstacles instead of foundations. Our 30-year-old mainframe processes $1, 2 billion daily. Not because we're afraid of change, but because it was built to handle complexity that most modern systems can't even dream of. After the presentation, I had executives lining up to shake my hand, offer consulting gigs, even a few job offers. One competitor offered me $350,000 to head their modernization initiative. I politely declined. At 59, I'd finally learned that the best revenge isn't getting rich. It's being respected for what you actually know. Back at Apex, things were running so smoothly it was almost boring, which, in the IT world, is exactly what you want. Melissa had evolved into the kind of CEO I actually enjoyed working for. She still pushed for innovation, but now she understood the difference between disruption and improvement. Lisa Park was handling system architecture reviews that would have challenged senior engineers at most companies. Kevin had developed into a solid DevOps specialist who actually understood why we did things certain ways before trying to change them. And Rachel was managing vendor relationships with the kind of personal touch that takes years to develop. The company's numbers told the story. 28% revenue growth through efficiency improvements, not cost cutting. 99.7% system uptime. 0 regulatory violations for 12 consecutive months. Client retention at 94%. But the real victory came during our quarterly board meeting when William Garrett pulled me aside afterward. Ray, Amanda Richardson wanted me to tell you something. She said your approach proved that sustainable growth beats disruptive change every time. Coming from the investor who'd almost fired Melissa a year ago, that was validation worth more than any salary increase. That evening, I was in my garage putting the finishing touches on my 1981 lowrider restoration when my phone rang. Another headhunter with another offer. I looked at Sarah's picture, smiled, and declined without even asking about the salary. Some things are more valuable than money, like knowing you've built something that will outlast you. 2 years after the whole authentication crisis started, I'm sitting in my garage on a quiet Sunday morning, putting the final touches on my restored 1981 lowrider. The chrome is perfect, the engine purrs like a kitten, and I finally feel like I've got my life figured out. Sarah's picture is still on my workbench, and I swear she looks proud of the man I've become. Not the bitter, fired employee I was 2 years ago, but the mentor and leader I never knew I could be. My phone buzzes with a text from Lisa. Ray, new authentication system passed all regulatory tests. Ready for Monday deployment. Thanks for teaching me to build bridges instead of walls. At 61, I've become something I never expected. The guy other people come to for advice. Not just about systems, but about leadership, about building teams, about the difference between being smart and being wise. Melissa texted me yesterday after she got back from a CEO conference. Ray, 3 people asked me how we turned our company around. I told them we stopped treating experience like a liability and started treating it like an asset. Danny showed up with coffee and the Sunday paper, our friendship deeper now because of everything we'd been through together. Ray, you see this article about Harrison Manufacturing? They're expanding their payment processing volume with us by another 20%. Said they trust our innovation balanced with stability. I started up the Harley and listened to its perfect idle. 2 years ago, I thought my career was over. Turns out it was just getting started. You know what the best part is, Danny? What's that? I didn't just get my job back. I got something better. Respect for what I actually know, instead of just putting up with me because I'd been there forever. He laughed. So what's next for the famous Ray Coleman? I looked at Sarah's picture one more time, then closed the garage door. The afternoon was perfect for a ride up the Columbia River, and I had some thinking to do about Monday's mentoring session with our new junior developer. What's next? I'm going to keep building bridges, Danny. Turns out that's what I'm actually good at. The motorcycle roared to life as I headed toward the river, planning my afternoon while mentally preparing for another week of teaching the next generation that the best technology isn't about replacing the old with the new. It's about building something better by combining both. Some people think revenge is about getting even, but the best revenge? It's proving that what you know has value and then using that knowledge to build something that lasts. That's a lesson worth learning, whether you're 25 or 65. Trust me on this one.